Funding for This Is Nashville comes from Burr and Foreman Law Firm, serving clients with transactional, litigation, and regulatory needs. Discovering how each client defines a win and working with them every step of the way to achieve it. Burr.com.
I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. The monarch butterfly. It's a beautiful creature. In some cultures, it symbolizes the return of the souls of ancestors. In others, it represents spiritual change, transformation, and rebirth. The Tennessee Department of Transportation is seeking to help the monarch butterfly with Project Milkweed, a statewide effort to encourage Tennesseans to plant milkweed seeds and to help create breeding grounds for the majestic monarch butterfly. Project Milkweed is seeking ongoing success and sustainability as it moves forward. So let's meet some of the folks who are leading the project. Michael McClanahan is from the Department of Transportation. Michael oversees the project. He's joined by landscape architect Carol Ashworth, who works with the department to create pollinator-friendly habitats. Michael and Carol, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thank you, Khalil.
Good afternoon.
Yes, this is great. So I understand that the monarch butterfly has had really significant declines in its numbers over the past decade. Michael, tell me about this and the significance of Project Milkweed.
Yeah, so monarch butterflies are one species of pollinators, and pollinators are everything from insects to several types of mammals. They've absolutely had population declines in the past, couple decades based on a variety of factors. It's everything from habitat loss to overuse of pesticides, different chemicals. There's other stressors that have really decreased populations.
How was the project born?
So we started a Pollinator Habitat Program about 2015, 2016 with the passage of some federal legislation called the FAST Act. At the time, it got TDOT into the pollinator habitat game. It gave us some guidance that we needed to, establish a program or establish a set of construction specs, maybe do a specific project that encouraged pollinator habitat on publicly owned rights-of-way. You think about departments of transportation, they're just tremendous landowners across these different corridors of the state. You could really do some good by having some environmentally friendly practices, some maintenance practices that encourage pollinator use of the right-of-way. And so that's how we got started. We've been going at it since about 2016.
Okay. Now, Carol, tell me this. Why is milkweed so vital to the monarch butterfly?
Milkweed is the host plant for the monarch. It's the only plant. They can take nectar from other plants, but it's the only plant that they can lay their eggs on, and the eggs will survive. Once the caterpillars hatch, they eat the leaves of the milkweed. So it is essential to their survival, and the program is trying to build way stations along their amazing migration routes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, can you tell us what a monarch caterpillar looks like?
Well, they're beautiful. They're sort of a limey yellow-green with black stripes.
Okay, so they're kind of lime green with black stripes. How big can a monarch caterpillar get?
I would say 2.5 to 3 inches.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So be on the lookout, everybody, if you see one. All right. I think most of us understand the need for pollinators, but what will happen? Tell us this, Carol. What will happen to our environment if the monarch butterfly goes extinct or its numbers are extremely low here in Middle Tennessee?
As far as the monarch specifically, they're part of a much bigger system of pollinators. So if we lose pollinators, we would have nothing to eat. They provide the pollination for our food sources. Michael, do you remember the number actually to the worth as far as Tennessee agriculture?
It's widespread. So it's everything from, the cotton that's blooming in fields in the Delta part of this state to, the corn and the squash and all the other great vegetables we all love to eat. The pollinator species really help to get that plant growth maturity as it gets pollen from one plant to another.
All right, so some specifics on how the program works. And Michael, tell me, what can residents expect? I sign up, I get my packet. What's next?
Yeah, so we're pretty excited, and we've kind of learned some tricks along the way. This is our second growing season that we've had this available to the public. But essentially what we've done is create a mail order program where you can fill out an online form. You're going to give us your address and request for 2 different species of milkweed. You've got red milkweed or a common milkweed, and then a swamp milkweed. So you've got 2 different species that you can choose from. You've got a number of packets, a quantity of packets that you can choose. We're going to put that in a mailer and send it to you. And then at the end of that, we hope that it goes into the ground, that it comes right back up, and that you're able to see that milkweed popping up in your garden and your yard. That those pollinators come visit you, and that you can have some amazing experiences. Hopefully, share some really good pictures with us too. We'd love to see that.
What is the difference between common milkweed and swamp milkweed?
So actually, it's red and common that we're providing.
Okay.
And we chose those 2 because from observations in the field we have already done almost 35 acres of pollinator meadow across the state by partnering with the other state agencies and the state parks and welcome centers. And so by observing the activity, it seems that those 2 species seem to be the best for hosting the eggs and thriving the most for the caterpillars. And then the other difference is one is more of a clumping type plant, the red. But if you have a big area that you don't mind it just taking over with milkweed, the common would be the better choice for that. And all how to plant the seeds, the time of year, all those resources are on the website as well when you go to order the seeds.
Okay, how have Tennesseans responded to the program?
It's been pretty impressive, and it's not something that I think, would have guessed at the onset. We had an initial order of milkweed, seed material that we had in stock. We went through that lickety-split last summer. We announced in June 2023, and we went through our stock by August.
Wow.
We did a reorder where we ordered triple the amount of material that we started with. We went through that, and then we went viral. And so by the end of last year, I'm sure several of your listeners had ordered seed and had waited for us to deliver it. We got done sending out milkweed seed the week of New Year's in 2023. We paused the program. We geared back up. We learned some lessons, made some tweaks to the ordering process, and then launched again in June. We want to make it a sustainable effort on our part. We want to make sure that we're offering, free milkweed seed to Tennesseans every year. We're going to continue to do that, but we're closing in on 1 million, seed packets mailed out and close to 200,000 individual orders.
Okay, I don't want to pit the 3 regions of Tennessee against each other. We've got East, Middle, and West. Who's performing the best, and who could pick it up a little bit?
Oh, wow. I don't think we've taken the data of who's ordered, and we should do that and see where most of them are going.
We have zip code level data based on where we're sending these to, but we haven't done the analysis.
That would be interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll get back with you on that.
Please let me know, and we'll see if Middle Tennessee is on top. I'm sure listeners would be happy to hear that. Okay, so Carol, I get my brightly colored packet of milkweed seeds. What is the best process for planting them?
Ideally, if you really just want to take the easy route, get them in before winter. So the seeds have a hard coating on them, and they need to go through a process called stratification. And if they're in the ground through the winter, the cold, the freeze, the thaw, the moisture will help soften that hard outer coating. If you wait till spring, and this is all on the website, you can cause that same process to happen by putting them in the refrigerator in a moist paper towel and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they do need to go through that process to germinate.
How do I tend to them once I see signs of life, monarch eggs on the plant? What should I do?
I would just leave them alone and observe the miracle.
Okay. No extra watering, no fertilizer, just leave them out and let nature take care of it.
They're pretty tough plants. Probably as they're getting established, keep an eye on them. If they start to wilt, give them some water. But once they get established, they're native. They're meant to adapt to the conditions here.
Okay.
You may end up with more of them than you really wanted.
Okay. So they spread rather quickly.
The one variety does, yeah.
All
They're
right.
common.
So this might, hopefully it doesn't sound like a silly question. I see young caterpillars on there. What can I do to keep them safe? There's predators, there's birds, there's other things.
Yeah.
I have cats. What can I do to make sure that I plant these milkweeds? I have got young caterpillars on there, hoping one day to develop into beautiful, majestic monarchs. What can I do?
I think the first thing that we tell people about milkweed is wherever you plant it, make sure you're not using pesticide around it. No pesticide, no herbicide. That's probably the most important step because it will take them out.
And I guess there's going to be a certain percentage of loss just due to birds have to eat too.
Yeah.
If you do have cats in your yard, it might be a good thing for the milkweed.
The other part about this is that they're not hanging out for too much long. After they're born and
Right.
They're on the host plant and they're definitely going through their metamorphosis, but they're looking to move on and migrate either north or south depending on the time of year.
Yeah, it's a pretty short cycle.
Yeah, they get ready and they get out.
Yeah.
All right, so Michael, have you planted some in your yard?
I have, yeah. I have an experience with that at my house. I ordered some seeds in 2023. I got them late, so I did not get them in time to cold stratify. I had to kind of mimic that by roughing up the seed jacket in the spring. I planted probably about March. We had an early spring, a couple months ago, if you guys remember that. But I've got them in the ground. I was not successful. I did not have things come up this year.
No, really?
Yeah.
What do you think it was?
It might have been me getting it in the ground too late, I think. I think I needed a plant probably about, October, November.
Now, okay, so is it too late for what Michael planted to potentially pop up next year, Carol?
If it hasn't germinated, I doubt it will since it's been in the ground for so long. But
Okay.
you can always try again.
Okay, because I don't have much of a green thumb and I'd love to
Yeah.
participate. Are there anyone who's a little bit nervous, hasn't had success raising plants like myself?
Well, mine didn't come up either. So this
Okay.
year, I'm going to try them in a tray or in a planter or something. And then if I can get the seedlings going, I'm going to put them in the ground that way.
Okay. Now, I understand you take trips to Mexico to
I do.
visit
Yes.
and see the monarch butterflies.
Well, yeah. I live in Mexico part of the year. And year before last, I took a bucket list journey to the mountains of Mexico and went to the reserve. It's a remarkable thing. They have 3 generations of monarchs that breed, and the 4th generation flies all the way from Canada over 3,000 miles to this very small area in the mountains of Mexico. And it's amazing that area, unfortunately, is under threats from poachers and development. So, this is really important. What we're doing also is keeping their numbers alive as they go through their migration.
We have a lot of development happening out here in Nashville area specifically. Michael, how is the Department of Transportation looking to ensure that there's green space for all pollinators and nature to persist?
So I'll tell you the most important thing that we're looking, and it's really statewide, but definitely, Nashville, it's the same for Nashville, is just making sure that you're doing what little you can in your yard, in your area, in your community, to encourage, native plant growth, maybe curtail invasives if you've got something that's coming in that's encroaching, limit the use of pesticides and herbicides, spray less. That's really the ways that I think almost anybody could contribute.
I can potentially see a bunch of monarch butterfly Halloween costumes. That would be really cool. Okay, so Michael, tell us one more time, how can listeners become involved with the program?
Yeah, so go to the website and tnpollinators, plural.org. tnpollinators.org is the website. We have a tab at the top of the page that's called Project Milkweed, and there you'll find species information, planting information, the online order form, and we would we'll have that available to the public through December.
Is there a social media page attached to it?
You absolutely could check in with any of the My TDOT accounts, social accounts, and we'd love to hook you up that way too.
And Carol, when are you going back to Mexico?
December.
December?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I have to work. I would join you.
But could I add one last thing?
Yeah.
On our website, Project Milkweed is just one item. There's lots of resources on the website. We have educational videos, animated videos, and learning modules for children. We have a very in-depth pollinator plant database that you can go in if you're a designer or researcher. It's like an academic level. So there's lots of good stuff on there. We have speaker program if you're looking for someone to come to your church or group to talk about pollinators.
Wonderful. Carol Ashworth is the project manager for the Pollinator Habitat Program, and Michael McClanahan oversees Project Milkweed for the Tennessee Department of Transportation. Thank you both for being with us today, and thanks for helping keeping the pollinators around.
Thank you, Khalil.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll turn our attention to honeybees, the great pollinators that are key to our ecosystem. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil A. Colonna, and this is Nashville. Sometimes it's important to stop, take a breath, and sit with the simple yet vast beauty of the natural world around us. Today, we're going to admire our honeybees, the great pollinators that are key to the ecosystem, and they make the delicious superfood we all know as honey. Joining us are beekeeper Gene Smalley, Mike Studer, state apiarist and apiculturalist, and Ian Daw, founding member of the Honey Collective. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to This is Nashville. The weather is getting warmer a little bit, and bees and other flying creatures are kind of about doing their thing. They're going to be out for the spring and summer. Bees are great pollinators. They make this wonderful, delicious superfood called honey. They're key to the ecosystem as well. Mike, here's a question for you. How many bees do we need here in Tennessee to have a healthy population?
We need at least 80,000 colonies in the state of Tennessee. Right now, we have about 50,000.
So we're 30,000 short.
Yeah.
Why are the numbers so low?
Because diseases and pests that have come into the country since the 1980s.
So this has been a problem for 40-some years.
Yeah, back in 2008, we were down to about 8,000 colonies.
Wow.
And now we're back up to 50.
Well, how did we make the bounce back?
Resilient beekeepers.
Okay, well, I didn't know that the state had an official apiarist. Did I say it correctly?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. But tell me, what is an apiarist?
Somebody that keeps bees, basically.
Okay.
But my job is to make sure that the bees in the state are healthy and that we have enough to pollinate our crops.
Now, did the position of state apiarist come in the 1980s when we had this struggle?
No, it came in back in the 1940s when there was a disease called American foul brood that spread across the nation and wiped out almost all the colonies in the U.S.
Wow. So this has kind of been a little bit of an ongoing problem. The population goes up, then if something comes along, it sinks, and we just constantly restore them.
Yeah.
Would you say it's sort of the balance naturally in the world?
Yeah, you could say it's a natural balance. I mean, everything, you have disease issues that come and wipe out populations and then they rebound. It can be considered a natural type thing.
Okay. Now, Ian, you're a beekeeper and a master gardener. Where did your love for bees develop?
When I was gardening back in England, I had always known of some neighbours beekeeping, but I never had the opportunity myself to follow through on that. So in my garden, I actually just concentrated on growing native plants for the benefit of pollinators and honeybees. And now I'm in America, now in Nashville, I've got the opportunity of keeping my own bees, and I'm absolutely loving it. I've kept bees now for 7 years. I've got 12 colonies in 3 different locations.
Wow.
I started the cooperative with a couple of other beekeepers last year. But my main thing I love to talk about when people ask me about bees is supplying the bees and native pollinators with an abundance of flora to keep them sustainable.
I've got some questions about that for you, but Gene, you're a beekeeper as well. So how did you become so obsessed?
When I bought my first house, I started planting fruit trees, and they would flower every year. They fruited the first year, and they wouldn't fruit anymore. And so I started asking questions, and what we learned in 3rd grade came to pass. You need bees to pollinate the trees so we can eat. So I subsequently fell in love with the bees, and I mean, the trees are still there, but I'm here.
Yeah. Okay, so walk us through the steps of becoming a beekeeper. What does anyone listening have to do it the right way?
What I did, and I'm not saying I'm right. Let's get that straight.
Okay.
But what I did, I decided that I wanted to try beekeeping. And so I got a book on beekeeping. And then once I started reading that book, it helped me decide if I really wanted to, start beekeeping. And then I called Grandma and said, "Hey, Grandma, I want some bees." And she said, "You can handle it." And then that was it. Grandma had faith in me, so I kept going. And then what I would say is read before, get you some bees for Prac App, and read after. Continue your reading.
So it's
always do research. Like American foul brood, you need to know what that is. Most people think it's something that it's not. It's a bacteria. So if you know that, knowing is half the battle. And you can fight the bacteria and not this big thing that's looming over you.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense.
Well, Mike, are any permits or licenses required to become a beekeeper?
You're required to be registered with the state.
Okay.
And you're required to have your bees inspected if you're selling them or moving them within the state. So that's the legal things.
Okay.
But you can keep them anywhere in the state of Tennessee. We have them right downtown Nashville on top of buildings. In every city we have, Chattanooga, Knoxville, Memphis, Nashville. There are bees within the city limits. There are bees on top of buildings. There are bees in real close proximity to neighbors, which don't cause a problem normally as long as people do what they need to do. You don't want them flying straight across your neighbor's yard. You want to put some kind of barrier up there so they have to fly up above head height so they're not running into people.
Yes. All right.
As long as they stay out of their flight path, they're okay.
That's good to know.
Yeah. And what he said about getting started, the best thing you can do is find another beekeeper and go out with them and learn with them for a year before you get your bees. That way you really know whether you want to spend the money to get into it.
How much does it cost?
About $1,000 per colony.
Wow.
So it's not cheap. By the time you buy everything you need, it's about $1,000 per colony.
So only serious
enthusiasts
need apply.
Well, you can build your own equipment.
Okay.
There's things that you can do, but yeah, it's not a cheap hobby.
Well, if you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekalona. We're talking this hour about the pollinators of our ecosystem with Mike Stutter, Gene Smalley, and Ian Dahl. You can join the conversation and give us a buzz by tweeting us at This Is Nashville. Okay, so we know that, bees get nectar from flowers. Now, a few years ago, when I was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, my housemate, best friend, became a beekeeper, and I was helping him. So before we got started with the bees, we planted a ton of buckwheat in the front yard, expecting the bees to come and use that. The colony was in the backyard. But they totally ignored our yard, and they preferred our neighbor's yard, which had a plethora of different types of flowers and plant life. Ian, tell me, why did the bees that we so carefully took care of ignore this bounty of buckwheat to go to the neighbor's yard?
Honeybees, like all pollinators, are very good at finding the best source of nectar and pollen. And if there's something better for them than your buckwheat, then they will visit that. Yes, they will come back to the buckwheat, but once they find a better source, they will go visit that. And all the bees within a colony will be informed by the bees that come back from a foraging trip that there is a source that direction, that far away, and they will visit that one.
Okay. So it's like the bees came back. They said, yeah, there's some buckwheat in the front yard, but we got like passion flowers and all this other stuff. Oh, go over here. It's prime pickings.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But tell me, is it like best practice to constantly monitor and feed your bees, or should you let them kind of develop and grow on their own?
I only give artificial feed to a colony that's establishing in its first year. Once it has survived its first winter, at the end of the first year, when I'm doing my extraction, I should say, I leave a lot of their own honey on, at least 50 pounds per colony. I do not take that off. And then they use that for their own winter survival. And then coming into the spring, they have probably got a little bit of surplus left, but they're ready for spring build-up. The queen is laying heavy again to build the colony back up to a healthy size, and they can start foraging again in the spring, which is about to happen this week.
Okay. So you say at the end of the season, you leave 50 pounds of honey for them. How much honey does the average colony yield? Gene, that sounds, 50 pounds is a lot of honey.
Oh my gosh. You can get up to 250 pounds per hive. It just depends on the season and what's out that season. So what flowers they get into. If we have a spring that's wet and dry, meaning like maybe you get some showers every day, like in the night or early morning. Mm-hmm. And then when the sun comes out, it kind of dries things up a little bit, but the nectar is still flowing.
Gotcha.
So if you have a year like that, it's no telling what you can get.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I wonder what's threatening our existing bee populations. Mike, what are some of the major threats that we're facing here in the region?
The main threats we're facing right now are varroa mites, which is a mite about the size of a seed tick that gets on the bees. And it's spreading viruses. It's a vector kind of like the mosquito is for West Nile virus and things like that for us. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest issue. There's around 39 different viruses that have come into the country that are being spread from the viruses to the bees. And that's our biggest thing. And one of the things with foraging and feeding is the more sources they go to, the better forage they've got, the better nutrition they've got. So the better off their immune system is. Mm-hmm. And if you're taking all of the honey away from them and feeding them back sugar syrup, then their nutrition isn't good. So then their immune system's down. So they've got problems. So beekeepers like these that don't take all the honey, help their bees out. The people that take all the honey and try to feed them back sugar syrup to get them over the winter, they're the ones losing their bees.
Ian and Gene, I see you shaking your heads. Yes. Yeah. So basically for humans, it's better for us to consume honey than high fructose corn syrup, essentially.
Yes.
Okay, so, what are some of the better ways that we can take care of our bees? What are some of the best practices, Mike, to help keep them, Ian, to help keep them healthy?
When I'm talking to gardeners, beekeeping is a great segue to talking about looking after the pollinators. Even if you don't want to convert your whole lawn to a prairie scenario, you can just have a couple of strips either side of your driveway or pathway. Just plant some natives, some local natives, and there's plenty of resources to find out about information. Wild Ones supplies plants and seeds. Start planting some natives, and you'll be amazed at how much life, including honeybees, stops by your yard instead of just flying over it.
Now, you were just talking about pollinators in general, and a lot of people confuse bees with wasps. Gene, how can we tell the difference?
What I'm going to say probably doesn't make sense, but when you internalize it, it will. Wasps look like they're trying to find something, like they're hunting. and bees look floaty, like they're floating on a cloud. And so one of the reasons is wasps are actually hunters and bees are gatherers. So wasps eat meat. They eat nectar and other things, but their main source of protein is meat. And bees only eat nectar or gather plant material, basically. So you can kind of tell their flight pattern. And you can tell, like, when a wasp comes at you, like, it beelines towards you. That's a bad use of the word, but it's, like, direct towards you. When a bee comes at you, it's kind of floating around, checking you out.
Okay.
Wasp looks like, hey, I'm about to get on you.
Okay.
In a bad way.
I find bees do their best to leave you alone. It's only when you start aggravating them, waving your arms, that they're going to be aggressive back. And if you're stood right next to their hive, then obviously it's likely that they might get defensive.
Yeah.
But if you're out in the field and it's looking for nectar and pollen, the last thing it wants to do is attack you. It just wants to get back home with nectar and pollen.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all for coming on the show and giving us the lowdown on the bees and here in Middle Tennessee. I want to thank my guests, Gene Smalley, state apiarist, Mike Studer, and Ian Daw of the Honeybee Collective and Nashville Area Beekeepers Association. Thanks again, gentlemen, for keeping us on the buzz, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Now, we've got to take a short break. When we come back, we'll learn how we can encourage our local pollinators to do their thing. If you want to attract pollinators to your yard, do you have a question on how to make that happen? Now's the perfect time to tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. So we've been learning about pollinators like the monarch butterfly and bees. But while they're doing their work to support our ecosystem, invasive plants are doing just the opposite. Joining us to discuss are Andrew Bell, Executive Director at the Nashville Tree Foundation, and Dr. Matthew Blair, plant scientist and TSU professor for the College of Agriculture. But first, local park officials are working to eradicate these species in our forests and along our greenways, and then they plant native species. That is a lot of work, and it depends heavily on volunteers. Our producer, Tasha A.F. Lemley, got out with one group, getting their hands dirty this past weekend at Shelby Bottoms.
All right, grab a shovel. If somebody wants to grab, there's this
Isaac Santos, he's an AmeriCorps volunteer serving with Friends of Shelby.
The first thing you have to do is pull them out of the ground. So we've been doing a lot of that, but today we're going to be doing all planting. So we're going to be going out to areas where we have removed invasive species.
About half of the volunteers who came out for this planting event, they're from Sunday Assembly, a secular congregation in town with no doctrine and no deity. Their mission? To live better, help often, and wonder more.
Do it quick. Hi-ho, hi-ho, hi-ho.
Wendell Jackson is one member looking forward to some hard work.
Well, the main goal is to get some calluses, to look manly. Dun, dun, dun.
A lot of the underbrush we see in a place like Shelby Bottoms was not supposed to be there. It's stuff like honeysuckle and privet, which are technically shrubs.
So this right here, this is a big old privet. So as you can see, these things, these are like bushes and shrubs, but they transcend bushness sometimes. I mean, this is hardly a bush.
He says some of these plants have a longer photosynthetic period that gives them an edge over native plants. Their leaves, they stay longer into the winter, and they come out earlier in the spring.
So before any of the native plants can grow up, they're out there catching all the sunlight and blocking it and growing up.
Over a little more than an hour, volunteers plant about 60 tiny dogwood and redbud saplings, each with a little blue ribbon so they can track their progress and water them if needed.
It's good. We got one planted there. Yeah, we need some water for it, though. Yes.
The hope is that over time, these are going to grow into guardian trees that will help protect the edge of the forest and keep the invasive shrubs from returning. Brian Kaunacki is one of the invasive removal crew leaders. He says everyone can play a part. Removing invasive plants in your own yard can make a big difference.
They're going to contribute to an issue like we're seeing in the park because they spread through birds and insects. And also just by planting natives in their own yard, they can create such a hospitable place for all kinds of life instead of it just becoming a green place that looks pretty or, a pink and purple place that looks pretty. You can look closely and see just like thriving life all over the place.
Guardian trees, I like the ring of that. Joining me now to talk more about invasive plants like honeysuckle and privet is Andrew Bell. He's the executive director of the Nashville Tree Foundation. Andrew, welcome to This is Nashville.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me, how do you encounter invasive plants in your work with the Nashville Tree Foundation?
We mostly encounter them because we plant predominantly or mostly on public lands, Metro Park property and Metro Nashville Public Schools property. And I would say that the majority of the encounters we have are at parks properties because parks landscapes are somewhat managed and somewhat natural. And it's that buffer in between the two is where we encounter them most.
Can you tell me more about privet? We heard about it in the segment previously. What's up with that bush?
Privet is not used as much in the landscape as it once was, but it's still readily grown out there. But I think it's primarily because it was planted decades ago. People use it for a hedge. If you want to think of a green barrier between you and your neighbor that you can mound or square off, you can keep it at 5 feet, at 10 feet. It was pretty versatile and very valuable from that standpoint. But the birds love the fruit and they spread it around, and it really is all throughout Middle Tennessee.
Okay, so let's talk about the Bradford pear tree. For those who aren't familiar, what do these trees look like?
So first of all, I want to just draw a distinction between Bradford pear and Callery pear. The species is the Callery pear, and Bradford is just one variety or cultivar of the Callery pear.
Okay.
I always like to use the analogy of edible apples. If you think about Granny Smith and Red Delicious and Yellow Delicious, those are all varieties of apple. Bradford is a variety of the Callery pear. And in the spring, it flowers, has white flowers. It's completely in flower before the leaves come out. So it's just big round ball of white flowers before the leaves come out. And then in the summertime, it's glossy green foliage that then turns brilliant colors of red and orange. So it's really very attractive tree. But we know when it comes in encounter with pollen from another variety of Callery pear, then it produces viable seed and fruit that gets spread around by the birds.
Why is this tree a problem?
Well, it's just very adapted to our environment here. It is coming up in fields and fence rows. And when it's young, it has these really thorny shoots, and it's just becoming a huge nuisance and taking over areas that would otherwise be occupied by native trees and shrubs.
It's just super aggressive. And I understand, like you said, the tree is quite pretty. I can see why developers are planting them, to create this desired aesthetic, which it has me curious. I mean, how often do we invite invasive species because, we may not know what we're doing?
Well, I think mostly our invasive species, at least for plants, were accidentally introduced. We thought that they were going to serve a good purpose for us here, not knowing that they were going to cause a problem. We've educated ourselves a bit more about that over the last several decades. That, if you go on the other side of the globe, China and Japan, the ecosystems there have the same daylight. Some of them have the same environmental conditions. So the plants that come from those regions or insects come from those regions are automatically just adapted to our environmental conditions here. So I don't know that people intentionally introduce invasive species, but there's always a chance that a plant could become invasive when it's not native. And so we need to be really careful about thinking twice about bringing non-native plants into our area and into any area. Our plants that are native here can be invasive in other parts of the world.
The purple martins at the Nashville Symphony are really nice to look at. They're pretty. But are they great for our ecosystem?
I'm not an ornithologist, not a bird expert, don't claim to be. So I can't really comment on the purple martins other than the fact that I do enjoy seeing them. I've gone downtown to the symphony and watched them when they're roosting late summer, early fall. But I know it's a big discussion about removing the trees that they're roosting in, which is the Chinese elm, also known as the lacebark elm. And I attended a meeting about this, and I found it interesting that no one was talking about the fact that the trees that they're roosting in have great potential to be an invasive species, the lacebark elm, that is. It is on the invasive plant watch list for 3 states in the Southeast. 6 of the 8 states that border Tennessee have documented that it's escaped from landscape conditions into natural areas. And it's an enormous problem in Washington, D.C. at the United States National Arboretum, where they've had large plantings for breeding projects. Is escaped from those fields and is now all along the Potomac River. So it seems to be mostly adapted, if it's going to escape and become a weed problem, in riparian systems along streams and creeks and rivers. And those trees around the symphony are just blocks away from the Cumberland River. So
if you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekalona. We've been talking about how to recognize the invasive plants around us. My next guest can help us understand how these plants pose a threat to our agricultural system. That means our food, y'all. Dr. Matthew Blair is a plant scientist from TSU's College of Agriculture. Dr. Blair, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Khalil.
So how do invasive plants affect our regional crops?
So we all have our favorite weed that infests our backyard garden or our flower beds or a farmer's field. There are not many farmers left in Davidson County, but those that are often choosing organic or more diverse method of agriculture, which is good. I take as an example Green Door Gourmet. I always like to highlight their work, but all of us that plant seeds, we're using disturbed ground, and that disturbed ground is where weeds can come in, and some plants naturally do better in that disturbed ground, and even our crops have been selected to do that. But some of the big name weeds are Johnson grass and pigweeds. So those are 2 that I would mention as plants that inherently have a greater capacity. They actually go into not to get into the weeds, pun intended, they have a fixation of carbon dioxide into carbon 4 molecules rather than carbon 3 molecules. And this makes them inherently photosynthetically more efficient. And a lot of these invasives, I see a theme of that being a problem. One of the trees that should be discussed, as along with what Andrew mentioned, is the empress tree, and it happens to be one of these carbon 4 species. They just love to soak up the sunlight and soak up the carbon dioxide. So that might be a good thing, but in certain environments, it's a bad thing when it competes with our flowers and our veggies and our ornamental trees.
How quickly can an invasive species take over?
That's a good question. It depends on what human beings often do to help that invasive species along. So I've been driving around recently and noticing where the worst invasive species problems are, and they're often along the highways rather than the streets. And so the streets, we have people taking care of the environment, their front yard, their backyard, but along the highways, you see the spread of some of these even weeds that will get into your garden. So Johnson grass originally was from the Mediterranean, and I looked it up, and it's actually original species name was, or common name was Aleppo grass. So it gives you an idea of how drought tolerant it is and how abuse tolerant it is. And so it is was introduced as a forage and then just got out, produces a lot of seed. It's a little bit related to corn, but instead of having husks, it just spreads its seeds everywhere. And that seed grows up, and then it has runners or stolons that go from place to place from the mother plant out, creating these little colonies of dangerous grass. So it's almost like a species that in its own adaptation is fooling with our own mechanisms as growers, as planters, as people that want to control the environment to control that weed plant.
So let's talk about the amaranth plant, which is a pretty pesky one. I don't think I've ever seen one. Can you tell me, what does it look like?
Okay, I think you probably have seen, it just goes under another name. It's called pigweed.
Okay.
And it was because originally it was eaten by all the pigs. So when every farmer had a backyard and a pig in their backyard, it wasn't that much of a problem. But ever since we've gone into really heavy commercial agriculture with two main crops being corn and soybean in the state of Tennessee, we've started to have pigweed problems. Everyone's used to a little bit of pigweed in their vegetable garden. So they'll have different species that are local, like the spiny amaranth, the spiny pigweed. There's one really scary pigweed that's out there, and it's called the Palmer amaranth. It's not from another continent, but it's been spreading across various states in the South and now into the Midwest. And so when you talk to U.S. Department of Agriculture people and everybody that works at state levels with conventional farmers that have large acreages, they're frustrated with this type of pigweed.
What makes it so scary?
Well, again, it has the carbon for photosynthesis, so it's very efficient. And each amaranth plant, I consider a wonder of nature because in most cases, the weedy species have a few male plants and a lot of female plants. So that's obviously an advantage. And then the female plants can each produce over 500,000 seed. So you get exponential growth when these tiny seeds get spread around on air, on water. Some amaranths can actually float on the top of water until they get to the next location they're going to grow. And they also get stuck in the feathers of birds like geese and ducks. And as a result, this Palmer amaranth has spread all the way up the Mississippi with the flyway, with the migration. So sometimes we have to be really smart about ecological concerns to know exactly what an invasive is and where it's going to go next. And we should also ask, why do we consider it invasive in the first place?
You know, what are some of the most effective ways of preventing crop destruction when it comes to invasive plants?
So, well, modern agriculture has taken the view that it's all or nothing, and it's better to use the pesticides that were mentioned earlier for the control of some insects. In this case, they're using herbicides that control weeds, and herbs are just small herbaceous plants rather than the shrubby species. But these herbicides can also be used on some of the shrubs. And so conventional agriculture and a lot of conventional management systems have decided to go in and spray, for example, Roundup. And Roundup is a generalized killer of plants. As a result, it is very useful to the farmer to control weeds that haven't been genetically modified to resist this herbicide. But the amaranths, being that they produce 500,000 seed per plant, have evolved very quickly to develop tolerance to these herbicides.
Are there invasive plant species that are posing threats of this caliber to our climate now?
Climate change is certainly causing species that were more semi-tropical to grow in more environments that are agricultural. So the pigweed, the Johnson grass, does best in dry summers, and they're increasing. As a result, they're all the way up in Minnesota and past Missouri. But you have the same thing happening with some tree species. And I think a whole nother show could be about the tree species that are spreading because of climate change.
That is Dr. Matthew Blair, plant scientist from TSU's College of Agriculture. He was joined by Andrew Bell of the Nashville Tree Foundation. Thanks to you both for being here today. Thanks to you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. The segments in today's episode were produced by Magnolia Mckay, Tasha A.F. Lemley, and Joan Kite. They were directed by Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our technical director and board operators, Liv Lombardi. The masterminds behind our theme music are Larange and Namir Blade. You can listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get good podcasts. And the conversation doesn't end here. Comment and tell us what you want to hear on the show by leaving us a message at 615-751-2500. You can also find us on Blue Sky and Instagram and X at This Is Nashville. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil A. Colonna. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody, and be good to each other.